Mr. Chairman, can I close on one thing? I do want to thank both the chairman, the ranking member, and the full members of the committee for having a hearing on something essential to the economic prosperity and the future of not only our country, our allies, but most importantly, the communities and people we represent. And for a rare moment, as somebody who also participated in this sport, this is a rare committee of bipartisanship. We'll have our differences on a number of other issues, but you came together on looking to the future and how to make you play a constructive role in shaping it. And I want to thank both of you and the members for a real thorough discussion about what tomorrow can bring and how to make sure it's to America's advantage and our allies' advantage.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Emmanuel, Prime Minister Morrison. Really appreciate your participation today. Questions for the record are due 1 week from today, and without objection, the committee hearing is adjourned.
commitments that are public and reciprocal. First, as I called in a piece about a year ago in the Wall Street Journal, such a coalition would need the economic equivalent of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all at its core. Look no farther than what the EU adopted in 2023, after Lithuania was coerced by China, an anti-coercion instrument that focuses on deterrence and allows for retaliatory policies by the EU. Countries should support allies under economic assault with a unified response. Resilience requires a willingness to retaliate and recognizing China's weaknesses and prepared to go after them. I know that you find it surprising that I would advocate that. Nations would insulate themselves from China's pressure through collective resilience. That requires leveraging alliances. When I arrived in Japan, I worked to expand trilateral ties. Today, Tokyo, Washington, and Seoul, as well as Tokyo, Washington, and Manila, are not just allies. We're aligned. We strengthened our economic ties, enhanced our military readiness, and deepened our intelligence sharing. Second, America cannot self-immolate. The Chinese undoubtedly understand how important intellectual property and advanced research are to their own ambitions. It's a false choice to suggest the U.S. must pick between free markets and government intervention. To maintain our economic sovereignty, we must have both and invest in our advantages. Talent from around the world that comes to America, research and development, science, our universities. Surrendering our strengths is self-defeating. Finally, nations must have our own tools of economic cooperation, which can be used to shore up supply chain resilience. Reshoring without friendshoring will not succeed. In other words, we must offer victims real relief in real time from China's coercive trade actions, including export credit lines and expedited licensing. Australia's response to China's coercion is the best example of how to replicate going forward. And if I could, and I know I'm past my time, conclude with one single story. During my tenure in Tokyo, China banned Japanese seafood from its market, citing false concerns about contamination from Fukushima area. As ambassador and working with the Indo-Pacific in Honolulu, our military, we exposed the hypocrisy and coercion with photos of Chinese fishing boats operating in Japanese water fishing, having banned the Japanese fish. To show the safety of the seafood, I know you find it shocking, but I went swimming and surfing in Fukushima with members of the parliament and publicly ate local seafood and vegetables. I also led efforts to have our U.S. military bases purchase Japanese seafood and served it proudly at both the residence of the ambassador and at the embassy. And took a number of you also when you visited shopping at the local Fukushima area in Tokyo. At a very public campaign, China recently abandoned its boycott of Japanese seafood. Now, if I could, if one skinny ambassador with a big mouth could do that, imagine what countries could achieve together. Cracking the code of coercion isn't impossible. It takes unity and sustained resolve and respect for our allies. We are in a strategic competition between free nations that innovate and a surveillance state that imitates, between democratic resilience and authoritarian reliance. United, coordinated, and committed, an anti-coercion coalition is the best offense and the best defense against China's campaign of intimidation. Again, thank you very much for this honor to testify today.
Thank you, Ambassador. We'll now move to 5 minutes of questioning from our committee members. I'll begin with Mr. Morrison. During your time as Prime Minister, China issued a now infamous list of 14 grievances targeting Australia's domestic laws and sovereign decisions. What should that list tell us about the nature of PRC coercion and the kinds of values it seeks to undermine in democracies?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think fundamentally it demonstrates that the CCP fundamentally has a problem with representative democracies. and there are some irreconcilable differences between an authoritarian regime in China, as much as an authoritarian regime in Russia or Iran, for that matter, and the activities of free and open states. Late Prime Minister Abe, who the Ambassador know well and I knew well also, spoke of a free and open Indo-Pacific. That is a threat and a challenge to regime security in China. And I think we have to be clear-eyed about this and not pretend that there is somehow that this is going to be resolved through discussion. Discussion is fine, engagement is good, it's better than the alternative. But if we think that that is going to produce a change in the mindset in Beijing about what their objectives are, then we're frankly kidding ourselves. So you worked to coexist, to avoid conflict. That requires deterrence and a wide-eyed appreciation of what the Chinese state is all about. At every point, even the most moderate of their leaders, like Jiang Zemin, were very clear about the fact that even when they entered most favoured nation status, they still said to their officials that the West, and particularly the United States, is still looking to see us destroy our socialist system. They won't change. So we have to deal with that reality.
Give to leaders of other countries who are facing something like this?
I think the first one is to know what you believe in and why your country believes that, and you know what your red lines are. I mean, those 14 points that of grievances that they tabled, I remember I tabled them at a G7 meeting in Carbis Bay to all the G7 leaders. It was a G7 plus meeting. And I asked the simple question, which of you would relent on any of these points? And the answer was none. These are just the simple behaviours of transparent representative democracies with market-based economies. And so know that you believe those things, keep investing in those things, and understand what the red lines are that are produced by holding those beliefs. The other thing I would say is make sure that you're building your internal resilience to coercion, and that you mentioned in your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, that a whole of society approach is necessary. I completely 100% agree. And our response dealt with everything from interference in our political system through ensuring that we kept an open mic for free speech in our parliaments and media and so on. You need to build the internal resilience, and that means an appreciation of the potential threat. And that is somewhat in jeopardy in Australia. Most recently, the Lowy Institute completed a survey, which for the first time in quite a number of years, there is a greater value on the economic partnership with China than concerns about the security threat, and I'll table that for the committee. That is an objective of the CCP, that Western democracies will go to sleep on the threat. And that's why I think the work that your committee is doing here, the work, and I'd stress the bipartisan work that is done by this committee, and the Ambassador and I perhaps might disagree on some elements of policy, not sure. We'll have to have a beer and find out. But I know one thing, by our statements here today, I think we've sung from the same song sheet as indeed you and the ranking member have.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, I'd like to follow up on your testimony where you talk about basically in Article 5, economic, sort of a collective defense mechanism. Could you talk a little bit more about that idea?
Sure. Two kind of predicate moments. One is how the EU came to Lithuania's defense, and China realized Europe was bigger than Lithuania, and it was too much. The second piece is when the G7 was held in Japan when I was ambassador. There was an adoption, or the first time actually in the communique, a reference to coercion by China in some effort. So you have the two predicates. And then I suppose the third point is I do mean this when you look at Korea,